let's go ahead and get started. So glad y'all are here. Let's start with this week with kind of a recap of where we've been. Where did we start in the story? The Garden of Eden. Okay, we started there. Before that, what did it say? Do you remember about what God did before? He created the heaven and earth. The angels rebelled, and then He created the earth the way we think of it. And then we have the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve. Right, God created them, and so what happened there? Okay, they did what God told them not to do. Yeah, and so at the end of that story, God provides for them, because they were shameful after the end, and they had fig leaves, and then we have God killing an animal to give them clothes and sending them out into the world, out of the garden, out of His presence. And later on to die, because that was part of the punishment. And then this last week, Jasmine, do you remember what last week? Well, we got Noah, and then we had before that Cain and Abel. Yeah, and what we learned in those two stories is that all humans sin. They choose themselves over God. And then God looks at the heart, not just actions. So in those stories, we see God looking at the people's heart and then punishing and showing mercy at the same time. Because with Cain, He punished him, He sent him out of His presence, He marked him, but He also showed His mercy by not allowing people to kill him. And then, the people in the flood, they were evil. They were not. Here comes somebody else. Hi. So they were doing what's wrong, but God showed His mercy through Noah and his family and protected them through the ark. We saw that self and sin lead to separation and death, while obedience leads to life and relationship with God. God also says life is in the blood, and all life belongs to Him. That's where we ended up at the end of the story, is that all life belongs to God. And then we also discussed what it means that God has created and commanded us to be faithful. So that's where we were last week. This week we have one story, basically. This is the week we get one story instead of two, because there's 19 stories. And so we have 10 weeks. And so we get a shorter thing today. So let's start with the story. Noah's descendants forgot about God and how He had spared them in the flood. They made plans to construct a great city out of brick. They said, "Let's build a monument to ourselves that reaches to the heavens to show how great we are, and so we won't be dispersed across the world." God saw how people were gathering together to honor themselves instead of Him. At that time, everyone on earth spoke the same language. So God gave people different languages to make it harder for them to join together in rebellion. Then He scattered them all over the earth. Okay, why did God stop the people from building a monument to themselves?
Because it was a massive ego boost.
It was a massive ego boost?
Yeah, they thought they were the greatest thing.
Okay, what else do you think? Anybody else? Why did God stop them? It's a massive ego boost for them, but why else did God stop them? No?
God's a jealous God, and so He is the only one who deserves, He's the only one who should be praised, no other king, no other anything. So they're like, I don't think so. Like, no.
Yeah. God's a jealous God, and they were worshiping themselves, basically. And then, the other thing in there is that they were in it together, right? They were sinning together, this whole group of people, and so God is separating them so that they can't massively be together in sin. It's an interesting thing. Let's see. It says, so God gave them different languages to make it harder for them to rebel together. So, all right, let's move on. A few generations later, God established a special relationship and a promise with a man named Abram. This special promise was called a covenant, representing the deepest of all agreements between two people. God told Abram, I want you to leave your country and your family and to go to the land I will show you. I'll make you the father of a great nation and famous throughout history. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. The entire earth will be blessed through your descendants. This was an amazing promise God was making. He was choosing to bless the entire earth through one family of people. There's just one problem. Abram's wife, Sarai, had not been able to have children. So how would the earth be blessed through their descendants? Not to mention that they were getting old. At that time, Abram was about 75 and Sarai about 65. So God led Abram and his family to a land called Canaan. There God told Abram, look as far as you can see in every direction. I'm giving this land to you and your descendants. This land of Canaan would now be called the Promised Land. Some time passed, and Abram and Sarai still did not have a child. Abram asked God, what good are all of your blessings if I don't even have a son? I'm getting old, and soon I will have to give my inheritance to one of my servants. God replied to Abram, no, you will have a son who will inherit everything I have promised you. Then God took Abram out beneath the night sky and said, look up into the heavens and count the stars if you can. Your family will be like this, too many to count. And Abram believed what God said, so God called him righteous because of his faith. Even more years passed, and Sarai became impatient with not having a child. She asked her servant, an Egyptian woman named Hagar, to be a surrogate mother for her. Abram agreed with this plan. Hagar became pregnant and gave birth to a boy named Ishmael. But Hagar and Sarai's relationship became strained. During Hagar's pregnancy, she began to despise Sarai. In return, Sarai treated her servant Hagar terribly. Eventually, Hagar and Ishmael were sent away and not allowed to live with Abram's family. When Abram was 99, God appeared to him again, saying, I am the mighty God. Serve me with your entire life and live purely. I will keep my covenant with you for many generations to come. I am changing your name to Abraham, which means father of many nations. Remember this. I will always be your God, and you will always be my people. Then God said, I am also changing your wife's name to Sarah, which means mother of many nations. Very soon she will be blessed with a son. You are to name this son Isaac. Both Abraham and Sarah laughed to themselves in disbelief of God's promise. Abraham wondered, how can I become a father at 100 years old? How can Sarah have a baby when she's almost 99? Sarah thought, how could a worn-out woman like me have a baby? My husband is even older than I am. Abraham asked God, would you pass on your blessing through my son Ishmael? But God said, why did you laugh? Is anything too hard for me? About a year from now, you will have a son named Isaac. It is through him that I will pass on my blessing, not through your servant's child. Sure enough, a year later, exactly as God had said, Sarah gave birth to the firstborn son, naming him Isaac, which means laughter. The birth of Isaac was the beginning of God fulfilling his promise he made to Abraham. God desired for Abraham's descendants, called the Hebrews, to be a new kind of people who would show the world what it means to live in God's ways. What was Abraham's relationship with God like? Okay, he had a strong, trusting relationship with God, but he also deviated in faith. Anybody else want to share in that and what you think? It's a discussion, not a quiz. So,
I think he had a deeply personal relationship with God that many people didn't really have at that time.
yeah, he had a deep personal relationship with God that many people didn't have. I'm repeating things because of the live stream, just a reminder. So you don't think I'm just repeating what you're saying. Just make sure they can hear, because they can't hear y'all. Anything else? What in the story proves that? What kind of things in the story prove a deep personal relationship with God?
He up and left his country.
Yeah.
Didn't really tell him where he was going.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, sure, I'm out. So,
Okay.
that,
Yeah, he gets up and goes to Canaan. And what about where he doesn't trust God?
obviously had a son through Hagar.
Okay, Hagar. What about him laughing about Isaac, the coming child? That's always I don't know, we kind of laugh when we don't believe God sometimes.
That's kind of weird though. Like being born, parents already 100.
Yeah, they kind of lived longer than we do. So that is a little bit helpful.
It could have been like the years, like they didn't count the years like we do. Like that's just a theory though.
Interesting. All right. Where in the story did we see, kind of answered this, already. Where in the story did we see Abraham struggle to believe the promise? Huh? Laughing at God, with Hagar. What about, him thinking he's going to have to give his inheritance to a servant? That's and we're going to run out of questions, and it's going to be short. So,
Another thing that's tough. Imagine being a surrogate mother because you're nice and
okay.
You say, Austin, I couldn't hear it.
imagine being a surrogate mother because you want to help out, and then after you have a kid, you just
Yeah.
They got pretty catty. It was about
Yeah.
her stepping into that role, and so it wasn't that she was just nice.
Yeah.
It was both Hagar and
pretty
Sarai's issue.
Yeah.
It got pretty nasty and jealous.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing.
So,
It was not.
yeah, it was not a good thing, and the only way it would work is if she left.
She probably wouldn't have had a choice in the matter, honestly.
Yeah.
But she also saw it as an opportunity to step up as the woman, not a woman.
Yeah, that is true. She had an opportunity to step up as as the woman, as the way you put it, right?
I don't
Yeah.
know. That's
Yeah. And so there was definitely a problem with Hagar and the belief there. Do you remember what a covenant is?
Yeah, that's a strong promise.
Strong promise between.
Well, between man and God.
Okay. What did God promise to Abraham in this covenant?
that the world would be blessed through his descendants.
Okay. The world would be blessed through his descendants. What else?
Curse them shall be cursed.
Say that again?
Those who curse them shall be cursed.
Okay, those who curse them would be cursed. And what's the opposite of that?
Those who bless them shall be blessed.
Okay. And
And they'll multiply as many as the stars.
okay, many descendants. All right. Anything else in there? The land, that he promised them the land and that it would be theirs forever, basically. Okay. What does this promise tell us about what God is like?
I think it's another example of him providing for those who trust him.
Okay.
I think we tend to limit him. He's an abundant God. In terms of when he blesses extravagantly.
Okay.
And our minds can't always comprehend that, so we laugh.
I'm going to try to repeat that. Yeah. that God blesses us abundantly, and that we can't really comprehend that a lot of the time. And so we laugh. And that's kind of what happened in this story. So what else? This is one thing on the last question that I think, God's promise was also to bless all people through Abraham. Not just Abraham's like immediate family, but all people. And so that's one of the things that God is like. His desire is not just to bless a few, but to bless all people. And I think that goes along with what you were saying. Let's see. What else do we see as God's promise? Let me try that again. What does this promise tell us about what God is like? Anything else? Okay, his faithfulness. Oh. What else? Anything else? Come on in. Morning. So.
I've always been struck by him, how he changes their name.
Okay.
Changes their names, and basically, we are who he says we are.
Yeah. Their identity is found in God at that point when he changes their name from Abram and Sarai to Abraham and Sarah, which makes them the father and mother of many nations. I think that's a really, really good point. Anything else?
Their purpose. They have a great purpose, and God has a great purpose for us once we recognize our identity in him.
Yeah, that's very good. That if, when we recognize our identity in him, that God has a great purpose for us, and they had a great purpose. So, all right. So, where so far in this story, and we're talking all the way back to the beginning of the story, Genesis, in the creation, does God keep his promises? The idea of what he said actually happened.
You see the big obvious stories like the flood.
Okay.
Like that. But you also have examples where God provides for Adam and Eve after the fall.
Okay.
And you see him throughout the generations. Basically, you see belief in him and trust in him follow through the generations as he provides.
Okay. The flood. Let's go there, and I can't repeat everything you just said. I'm gonna.
Big things like the flood, small things like providing for people.
Okay, he provides for people. All right, what else? What else actually happened in the story that God said would happen? If you go back to the beginning of the story at Adam and Eve, what else?
You would surely die if you ate of the fruit.
Okay, Adam and Eve died. They because they ate the fruit. God said, if you eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And so that actually happened. What else?
Are we talking about just what's happened in Genesis? Or
Just what's happened to this point in the story. So the way we look at it is we're always going backwards, not forwards. So in the story. So because what we realize is we all know, or most of us know where the story's going. So we're just focusing on where we've been, because it's like a movie where you can't focus on what you haven't seen yet. Okay? All right.
The curse of woman and man, like the pains of childbirth and then having to reap of the soil.
Okay, yeah. The curse has come true, and so from Genesis. What else? Anything in another story? Isaac. Okay. We've got Isaac being born. God promised that would happen. What about in the story of Cain and Abel?
You see God's justice.
Okay.
Whenever he curses Cain
Okay, he curses Cain, but there's some specific in this story that I think is God's promise.
He had promised that, like if anyone had tried to kill him,
Okay,
that they would, something with it, I don't know if he said they died of something.
they get 7 times worse than,
Yeah,
yeah. But what about when God says that sin is crouching at the door, and then Cain goes and it's gonna overtake you if you don't do something about it? That is God. That is fulfilled with Cain killing Abel. I think that's a really important one. So, anything else you can think of? Okay, God will never flood the earth again. Yeah, so far it hadn't happened. That's good. So, all right. Wow, that was... Let's see. I don't really want to start the next one because they go together. I don't think we have time to do both. So, let's, yeah.
Did you stop at the flood?
No.
In the story?
We had the flood last week.
Okay,
Yeah. And so, all right. Let's do this. Since we have some time, we have about 30 minutes. Because what we said is that this week was one story because there's 19 total stories. And so there's 2 on every other week, I think, and this is 1. And so we're stopped at a shorter lesson today. So let's do this. Let's see if we can do this and retell the story from the beginning. Y'all remember the beginning? So let's start at the beginning and retell the story. Like the very beginning of the stories.
How specific are we going? Like, God created the earth in 7 days.
Yeah, like the story that the parts of the story that are important that we've been telling. So, who is the story about? Right? Do y'all remember?
God.
The story's about God, right? This is where we start. The story of God, right? We're starting at the beginning with God. All right?
I have a comment. I mean, we laughed at that, but I think that's so
Yeah.
deeply part of our problem is we think the story's about us, and it's about God.
Yeah.
And so I like that. The story's about God.
Yeah.
Sunday school answer.
Well, I always,
It's a great struggle.
yeah.
Struggle with every single day. It's not about us. The story's about God.
Yeah, I always make the comment that history is His story, and not ours. But that's another. Okay. So tell me about God. If the story's about God, what is it? What does the story say about God to start with?
Well, it begins with Him before there was anything else.
Okay.
And so He creates the earth through 7 days.
Okay.
Then, towards the end of that, creates man.
Okay. All right. But I want to make sure we get one part. Do y'all remember? Okay. Yeah, we got that. But what is it? Let's start. God always. Well, it was, yeah, but always does what?
Right.
Always does what's right. He's holy. So he's perfect. He always does what is right and good. I want you to remember that and perfect. He's faithful. Okay. And then we talk about the angels, right? So, and what happened with the angels? They rebelled. And what happens to them because they rebel? They're banished from heaven, and they're going to face punishment later. Okay? And then,
The story was about God.
huh?
They forgot the story was about God.
They forgot the story was about God. That's good. All right? And then God decided to do what? Okay. Specifically, what part? Because everything, huh? Yes. Yeah. Okay. And so he creates the earth for the purpose of man, right? And so all the things he does are for the purpose of creating man. And then what does he do with the man? Okay, he creates a companion. Well, what does he do before he creates a companion?
He gives them the task of ruling over the land.
Okay, he gives the man the task of ruling over the land. Where does he put him? Okay, in the garden. And so, let's see. And then, how does he form man? Okay, and what does he do with the dust? It breathes life into the dust, okay. And then he calls him Adam. And then later, he creates woman from the rib, yes. Okay. What does he tell them to do? Be fruitful and multiply. What does he tell them not to do? All right. So, at the end of this story, when he creates man, what does he call it? Very good. He calls it very good. He calls everything else good. He calls the creation of man at the end of the 7 days very good. All right? Let's see. Then what happens? We get into the next section of the... They eat the fruit. The serpent comes. All right? And who does he talk to? He talks to Eve. And Eve does what? All right? Okay, but why? Let's see if we remember why. Okay, is tempted by the knowledge of good and evil.
She was deceived by
What?
Of like the promise of wanting to be like God.
Wanting to be like God. All right. What else? See if I can say this right. Ask the question right without saying the answer is the hard part here. God told them not to eat the fruit or you will surely die. The serpent says, you won't surely die. You'll be like God. What did they not do to God? Let's see if I can say that right. They didn't trust God. They didn't believe God. They weren't faithful. Okay. They didn't believe God. You won't surely die. They believed the serpent. They didn't believe God. What happened when they ate the fruit? They were ashamed. They got leaves.
They handed an eviction notice.
Yeah. I hadn't got there yet, though. The first part, they were ashamed. They covered their shame, and God comes in. They hide themselves from God. What else? Yeah. He asked them a question, right? What does he ask them? Where are you? What is their answer? They were hiding. And his next question is, why are you hiding, right? So, what is our tendency when we sin? Yeah. So, to be ashamed and to hide our sin. That's one of the first deaths in sin is the death of the relationship between God and man, and we hide our sin from God. Or try.
Which this is sort of a replay of what happened in heaven.
Uh-huh.
The angels had some sort of a relationship with God. They started to think more about themselves and being like God, like the serpent.
Yes.
The fallen angel tries to convey to them.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
They're kicked out of heaven.
Yeah,
And then an earthly heaven is created, and man is in it. And how many times had the serpent spoken to them before?
we don't know.
Right, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How had the temptation been there all along?
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know if the temptation's been there all along, but this is what she's saying is that this is a repeat of what happened earlier in the story, which tends to be what happens throughout the rest of the story, is a repeat of, at least for part of the story, right? So we get a curse, right? What is the curse?
As a woman was cursed in pain through childbirth.
Okay.
And man was cursed to work the land.
Yeah. Death. Okay. What is the promise in?
That God will bring someone to whatever, crush the serpent.
Okay, that God will crush the serpent. The child of Adam and Eve at some point will crush the head of the serpent, which is pretty important. What happens to Adam and Eve then? Well, before they have kids, at least as far as we know, they're cast out of the garden, and they're clothed by God. Okay. So, again, at the end of the story, God has done what is good and right and perfect because he has to punish sin, and sin cannot stay in his presence. And so, but he's also has mercy on them because he didn't kill them immediately, and he clothed them and took care of their shame. All right, so let's move on to the next part because we still have a little time. All right, the next part of the story, Cain and Abel. What happens? Okay, they both brought offerings to God. Tell me about Cain's offering. Okay. Tell.
Was the quality of the crops not that well? Was it his best crops or no?
Ah,
It doesn't really say.
I don't remember.
It says an offering.
yeah. So Cain brings an offering. What does Abel do? Abel brings the best of what he has. What is God's response?
No to Cain. Yes to Abel.
Okay. He accepts Abel's offering, and Cain's he does not. Do you think it has something to do with the attitude of the heart? Okay. So, what happens next? What does Cain do? He's jealous. And what is God's response to Cain in his jealousy?
Watch yourself.
Okay, watch yourself. What does he say about sin? It's crouching at the door. And it's going to overtake you if you don't watch out. And then what does Cain do?
He gets the rock.
Yeah. Takes Abel out into the field and kills him. Because he didn't believe God about sin. So, what happens to Cain?
God confronts him, and then basically tells him, well, why'd you do that?
Yeah.
Said the blood of Abel cried out to him, and
Yeah.
he was cursed and kicked out.
Okay. Okay, so we're back to covering our sin, right? So you've got God confronts Cain. Cain says, "Who am I, my brother's keeper?" Right? You know, like where I don't know where he's at. Of course you do. And then God says, "Look, your brother's blood cried out to me," and then He punishes him. Right? That's again we see covering our sin before God in the story, trying to do something take care of things ourselves. Okay, the next story, the flood. What's going on?
People have just completely deviated from what God wanted for them, except for Noah.
Yeah. So from Adam and Eve, sin continued to spread, right? We get to a time with Noah, and God sees that the intentions of everybody's heart is evil, right? Except, what does he find? Huh? Noah. It says Noah. Yeah. And so it says that Noah was righteous before God, because he believed God.
It was almost as if God regretted making humans because he said I should have never made him.
Yeah.
He wanted to be rid of all of
It's not like it was. He really did. He really did.
He wanted to
Yeah.
get rid of all of it, but then he sees Noah as a chance of a good reset button because he was faithful.
Okay.
So he saved him and his family.
Noah's the reset button.
An example of redemption.
Okay.
Well, and this is, it's hard for us to really think about, but this is hundreds of years of time
Yes.
gone by from, when we think down with their, down to Cain and Abel and on and on and on down to Noah. This is generations,
Yeah.
and they lived hundreds and hundreds of years. Was Methuselah his grandpa, or am I totally missing that?
Yeah, I think it was his grandpa,
You know,
900 something years old.
69 years old.
Something.
So,
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but you're talking about
Yes.
it wasn't like, okay, Adam and Eve, you're going to have to work the ground, and 30 years later, or even 100 years later, now here's Noah, or, Cain and Abel, and then,
Yeah.
there's a large expanse of time,
Yeah.
as it was just a degradation in morality and a closeness to God that just dissipated over
Yeah.
time.
And then you have a line of people throughout, like Methuselah, that are following and have a relationship with God. And you end up with Noah, who is the only person that God can say, this person really is worthy of, not even worthy of saving, but close enough that I can, And so what does he tell Noah to do? Okay. What does he tell him to fill it with? Two types of animals.
Yeah, like the male and female from every species.
Okay.
And then his family. And then
Wait.
There
There are 7 pairs of what kind of animals? Clean animals. The kind that were worthy for sacrifice. God had set aside for sacrifice. And so you got 7 pairs of those. You got 1 pair of the unclean animals that are going onto the ark. And who else? Yeah, okay. 8 people. And so God's promise comes in. He promises to flood the earth. What happens? Floods the earth. They're in there for a while. And let's see. The pigeon, dove, yeah. There was a raven at one point too, but the dove, he sends out the dove. Dove keeps coming back, brings back an olive leaf. Then it doesn't come back, and then they know it's safe to come out, And then what does Noah do? Okay, builds an altar, thanks to God, sacrifices one of each of the clean animals. And what does God tell him? Okay, I won't do this again. What else? Be fruitful and multiply. So we're back to be fruitful and multiply. Also, he tells them, gives them a command, or allows them to do something and then gives them a command about it. What is it? Do you remember? Okay, to take care of it, but the the thing he allows them to do is eat the meat. Can kill animals for meat, which obviously they weren't allowed to do before. But he tells them not to do something when they do that.
Something
Oh, not just for like sport,
living blood.
Okay, don't eat it with the blood in it. Yeah. Why?
Because there's life in blood.
There's life in the blood, and all life belongs to God. So the command is not to eat the animals that are strangled or still have the blood in them. And then the reason is because life is in the blood, and all life belongs to God. All right. And then what is the other? What does he give as a symbol of promise at the end of the story? The rainbow. Okay. And it's a covenant between God, right, and man, that God will not flood the earth and kill man that way again. All right. So into today's story, what happens?
We start with the Tower of Babel.
Okay.
People collaborate to basically become the best and build an idol to themselves.
Okay.
Tower to heaven.
All right, they build a tower to heaven as a monument to themselves. At the beginning of the story, they forgot about God, and so they're building a monument to themselves. So what does God do?
Makes them speak different languages to break them up.
Okay, so that they can't,
Collaborate.
yeah, so they can't work together for evil, for rebellion. Okay.
I think it's important to note that he didn't stop them when they just had the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, this took years and years to build this tower.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't just raise it at the beginning,
Yeah.
and so sometimes, we think we're all right, and we're building a little bit more towards ourselves, a little bit higher idol,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He's merciful.
He's patient.
Right, he's
Yeah.
patient with us, but he's still just, and so he's gonna tear it down, and he's not gonna allow us to get to the point where we're our own God, because otherwise it's destruction.
Yeah.
But we gotta take note of that for ourselves, because,
That's very good. And let me try to repeat that. Yeah, it's okay. No. Is that God is very patient, and that he does allow us to sometimes build, but he's not going to allow it to stand. And so he didn't allow this to stand because his glory is really the only thing that's going to matter in the end. So, all right. Then, so we've gone through the Tower of Babel, and then what happens? Today's story. Cut to Abram. Yeah. So,
Righteous.
Okay.
Far in the eyes of God, and God asks him to up and move to Canaan.
okay. But what is it? What do we say that God has a special covenant with Abraham? Okay. And what did we say a covenant was? Okay. According to the story, it's a deep agreement between two people or two parties, And then God told Abram to leave his land and go to the land that he tells him, and he goes, right. And then what does God tell him to do? What he will be. Let me try to say that again. What is? He'd be the father of many nations. What else? Okay. Have lots of descendants. And something you said earlier, those who, you don't remember what you said. curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. All right. And then what is Abram's reaction? You remember? Well, that's a little bit later.
At first, he just questioned it.
yeah, how is this going to happen? Because I don't have any children. And so, hi, Clay. Yeah. and so, let's see. God takes him and says, takes him to the land and tells him to do what? You remember? To look out in every direction, and as far as he can see, that will be his. All right. All right. Let's see. The next thing, God has promised him this. Abram says, how is this going to happen? I don't have a kid. I don't have a son. And so what does he do? What does Sarai and him do? They get impatient. They get a servant to be a surrogate mother. So they try to take care of the issue by themselves. They try to fulfill God's promises on their own. And again, that's something that we often try to do is God makes us a promise, and then we try to fulfill it on our own instead of waiting and being patient on God. All right. So what happened between Hagar and Sarai?
The relationship kind of crumbled.
Yeah. Big issues. And Hagar and Ishmael have to go. They are banished from the land. And then how old is Abraham the next time God says you're going to have a son? Pretty close to 100. And what do they do when God says you're going to have a child? They laugh. And so, let's see. Then God said, God changed their names, right? What did he change their names to? What do those mean? Father and mother of many nations. And that's when they really laugh because they don't have any kids. And then what does God do? Isaac means laughter. They have a son. So, all right. And this is the beginning of God fulfilling his promise to Abraham.